Ahlers, and I'm the managing partner of the Center for Coaching here in Switzerland. And of course, I have the privilege today of moderating today's session. I'm really excited as I see so many people joining today, as I said, from all over the world, covering multiple continents, which is delightful. And to start the evening, our webinar this evening, I'd like to share a quote that guided the theme of our webinar, which is the quote from Jack Welch, who said, "Before you are a leader, success is about growing yourself. And when you become a leader, success is all about growing others." And I guess this idea encapsulates what we really here to explore and to discuss together, that journey from our own personal growth to empowering those around you. And yeah, of course, this idea lies at the heart of impactful leadership. And we are going to be exploring that today with our speakers, Janine and Navid. So what we have planned for you this evening is a brief introduction from myself. And after that, we're going to go through the insights that will be shared from our guest speakers, Navid, who's joining us from Dubai, and Janine, who's joining us from South Africa. She's in KwaZulu-Natal at the moment. And as they share their personal stories to bring the insight into the theme of shaping leaders through coaching. And then we'll have a conversation between the three of us to unpack the themes of leadership and coaching further. And after that, we'll have an interactive Q&A session where any questions that you have, we'll take the time to address them, and they will steer the discussion. So please pop those questions as we go into the chat, which will then give us the material and the elements that can cultivate and give us that direction as to where you'd like to go with our discussion after we've had our conversation with Navid and Janine. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a closure and a brief invitation about our upcoming CFD program, which begins in January 2025. So that's what we have on the menu. And what I suggest is let's get this started, and we'll keep the session to just under an hour, finishing at the top of the half hour in just under an hour's time. So before we dive in, please, if I may ask, please keep your microphones muted during the session to minimize, of course, background noise. And Tamila, our technical host here this evening, will step in if necessary to help or support you if there's anything you need, or to mute if you suddenly get distracted. And as I said, please use the chat box as we go to share your thoughts or ask any questions as we go through the webinar. So I'd like to share my screen and just cover the core elements that I want to ensure that we have in place before we kick off our introduction from our speakers. So what we have for our webinar this evening. Firstly, I'd like to just introduce the Center for Coaching for those who don't know us. And we've been active for the past 23 years now. The center was founded at the Graduate School of Business at the University of Cape Town. And with the underlying intention of evoking excellence in yourself and others. And 10 years ago now, we started the Swiss Center for Coaching near Geneva, and we'll speak a little bit more about that as we go. The center does three complementary things. There are, first and foremost, is the teaching element, and this is where we have our Coaching for Development program, our professional coaching course, which some of you have completed as well. And in addition, something we started more recently, which is our Leadership Conversation series, to dig into as more of a masterclass, the conversations that are necessary to be able to relate to others as a leader. In addition, we provide coaching, one-on-one team or group coaching, and consulting as well to organizations about coaching cultures or in-house leadership development. To frame our discussion for those who don't know what integral coaching is, very briefly, it's really about looking at human beings holistically. So looking not only at how we think about things and how we engage cognitively with the world around us, but also, of course, how we engage emotionally and what are the actions and behaviors that cause our world to engage with us in a certain way. And that's something which, of course, perhaps is not the way in which other coaching modalities might engage, which are also very powerful. But what we have found is that, while other coaching methods may solve the problem, we like to focus on the person, not the problem, which means that we equip the coachee able to solve the original issue, not only the original issue, but also that they are better equipped to solve future ones. So that's just the kind of very high level view of the essence of what we are looking at in terms of integral coaching. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers this evening. And of course, we have, on the one hand, we have Navid, who is joining us from Dubai. And Navid is, in addition to being a globally recognized executive coach and best-selling author, Navid's book, Mastering Executive Transitions, The Definitive Guide, has become a go-to resource for leaders navigating change and all of those who are really interested in mastering the topic of executive transition. He has 26 years of experience in commercial roles, HR leadership, and he specializes in empowering leaders to excel in people, leadership, and culture. And he's earned many accolades, such as HR's most influential practitioner and coach of the year. And in fact, Navid started his coaching with us 10 years ago, his coach certification journey with us 10 years ago. And we're, of course, delighted to have him with us to share his journey and his insights with us today. Our second speaker is Janine Ahlers. And as you see, we share the same surname. So in addition to, of course, being my elder sister, of whom I am very proud, Janine is a certified integral coach and managing partner at the Center for Coaching here in Switzerland, as well as, of course, in South Africa. She also serves as the academic director of the center and senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town, the Graduate School of Business. And with over a decade of experience in corporate roles, she started coaching senior executives in 2002, helping them tackle strategic and leadership challenges. And of course, we're delighted to hear about the stories that Janine has to tell, because there are many and varied, and they will, of course, not only bring us insight and depth into the questions we have, but they will also be very enlightening as to the perspectives that we can all gain from that. Janine lives in Cape Town with her two boys and is also an avid boogie boarder, surfing the waves in her spare time. So let's dive into the heart of the session. So firstly, we're going to hear from Navid, and then we're going to hear from Janine about how they share about how integral coaching has shaped their own leadership journeys, and of course, the stories of others that they've worked with over the years. And as I said, I encourage you to jot down any questions that you have or reflections, when we'll address as many as we can in the Q&A. Navid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Janine, for the warm welcome. You're already making me blush ahead of my actual introduction. So it's a delight to be here. I could only see Tatiana on one of these tiles, who is a fellow integral coach and someone I shared the journey with. So it's with delight, and kind of towards the other end of the spectrum, I also see Magali, who is enrolled currently in my certified transition coach training. And so it's always nice to have the full circle kind of coming together. So yes, this is, and when you said 2014, it really, I have fond memories of that time. Of course, I was in Switzerland. I had been waiting for about 2 years to find the right time to embark on the coaching journey. I had spent, at that time, 18 years in the corporate world, 12 years of which I had spent in the HR function, a function that I truly admire and love. And after 2 years of waiting, I realized something quite fundamental for me. And that was the fact that the right time will never arrive. I had been so patiently waiting, just for things to calm down, just a little bit at work. And so I could really wholly, fully engage with this process of training myself up to become a coach. And when the email came out, I've been in touch with the Center for Coaching for years prior to that. I've been working with Janine, with Craig, and many other wonderful coaches from the center in my HR capacity, in my professional kind of capacity. And when the email came out that, oh, we are opening our store in Switzerland, I thought, you know what, this is my sign. And of course, it was a bad timing professionally to start anything on top of all the other stuff I was doing. So I was writing a book. I was a full-time HR executive. I was in a global role. I was traveling the world. And of course, as it just so happened, in the year 2014, I not only changed companies, but I also changed countries. So here I am. I picked probably the worst moment for myself to start the journey. And that coincidentally also happened to be the best time, because I just realized that the perfect moment, at least for me, would never arrive. So I might as well just grab the opportunity and go in. And so coming back to why I was so intrigued by the idea to train myself up as a coach, I go back to two things. So the first one is, and I say this from a space of being humble. I had spent 12 years in HR. I really felt that I had done more than my fair share of functional and technical knowledge accumulation, or in other words, horizontal development. At that time, I was, writing articles with the father of modern HR, Dave Ulrich. I really felt that I had it all together when it came to the HR knowledge. Now, I could have gone and do something different, like do an MBA or do something like that. But for me, it would be kind of more of the same. And so when I had this conversation with Craig at the time, and he started to talk about vertical development, I was just intrigued by the idea that, rather than kind of, this is kind of my large teapot here, rather than just filling more and more liquid into the same size container, what if I was able to enlarge the size of the container to be able to put more in? And that was kind of my intrigue. Now, the other story I want to share with you is my origin story, which is, I won't mention the company and the leader in charge, but at the time we had a talent review meeting, and there was a particular leader in sales who would, achieve and overachieve all and any numbers. And I remember the chief sales officer putting him on his succession plan. And as soon as that plan was revealed in our leadership team meeting, hell broke out. There was, violent disagreement with the fact that this one individual, a gentleman, I shall say, would have what it takes to succeed at the top team level. Now, there were all sorts of, reasons thrown at the candidacy of him. He was obviously not in the room. But I guess the most strong argument was that he's not a great leader. He may be the best salesperson the planet has ever received, but he may not be someone that we would consider kind of leadership material at the C level. Now, I, made the suggestion on the back end of that nomination if the leadership would be happy for me to go and hire a coach to work with that same gentleman. And of course, they said yes, very happy, but just, kind of mark our words. This guy will never become a sales director. So fast forward a year later, he had been doing the work with a very capable coach, arguably, and the same group came together with two changes at the top. So, out of the 12-member team, 2 were new and the other 10 were still the same. And the sales director put up his funnel, his pipeline of talent. And of course, he had the same gentleman as his ready now successor. Believe it or not, there was suddenly a discussion in the room whether the sales director role is good enough for someone of his caliber, or whether we should think bigger, broader, something outside of the country, something more immaculate and material. And that was my moment when I thought, what just happened in a year's time with the same individual was arguably not supported by a single member of this team other than his own boss. And suddenly there is this strong coalition of leaders supporting his candidacy. And not only that, they really want him to, be considered for more greater things. And so those were kind of the two stories why I decided to become a coach. And of course, I started doing my own research. At the time, I interviewed 20 HR leaders and coaches just to see what they have had good experience with. The Center for Coaching and New Ventures West came up as one of the top names. I then engaged with all those institutions. And of course, New Ventures West Center for Coaching came on top of the list. And that's why I was very happy to engage. So it was a hard decision. It was a scientifically data-driven decision. And it was obviously a big decision for me because I not only did the ACC, or what is called CFT today, but I did PCC and I did the Towards Mastery course back to back to back. So I embarked on a 3-year journey across 3 continents. And I really am incredibly grateful for what I have learned and all the skills that I could utilize, not only during my day job as an HR executive, but of course, it gave me a lifeline beyond my corporate time. And it's been an incredible journey to be on my own for 2 years. And I have really no regrets whatsoever. So that's kind of, my raison d'etre, why I became a coach, how I was intrigued by the idea to become a coach, how I suddenly realized after 2 years of waiting that the perfect time for me, at least, will never arrive. And that's why I thought I might as well just, get started. What do I do outside coaching? I'm a father, I'm a husband, and we moved recently to Dubai with our wonderful family. And it's been now just over 2 years that I am a full-time coach. And this is a not recorded call. If I knew how amazing it is, I would have probably jumped ship a lot earlier than I did. But hey, that's something for another conversation. So that's me. Really, really excited to be here, and I would like to hand over to Janine now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Navid, for that lovely exploration. And as you were saying, that notion of timing that we kind of impose on ourselves, it's interesting to reflect on that and to say, well, what is the right time for anything? And that your story really resonates from that perspective. And there are lots of questions, of course, that we can dive into. But first of all, I'd like to hand over, as you said, Navid, thank you to Janine, who's going to share from her perspective as well the journey that she has supported a number of leaders on as they have been through this journey of coaching for development, and share some stories from your extensive experience in that space. Janine, over to you.
Thank you. And thanks, Navid, for kicking us off. If I had known how discerning Navid was, but before he walked into our class, I probably would have been a lot more nervous having to teach him. He's so highly skilled already. And perhaps that's one of the amazing things about coaching, is that no matter where you are when you arrive, this work, particularly this way of working with people, it finds you where you are. So although Navid knew so much when he walked in the door, he nevertheless still found what we taught to be compelling and enlivening and something he wanted to continue to do. And that, just speaks volumes all on its own. So, yeah. When I think of my journey, what brought me to coaching? Why did I even start coaching? I think, like many people that have talked about their journey, why are they curious about studying with us? My life was very busy, very full. and from the outside looked terribly successful. And yet inside, I felt empty. I really did. And I was kind of, well, you know, if I just study some more, you know, first I was working in the orchestral world, then I thought, okay, no, I need then, yeah, I felt empty there. Then I thought, okay, let me go into the proper world of corporate or, you know, business. And that settled for a while, and then I felt empty there. Then I thought, okay, well, if I climb the ladder and get to the top, if I'm a director of a company, I feel better. So I climbed that ladder with a lot of it, you know, and thinking all the while, I'm very self-aware, very organized. And then I felt empty there too. I thought, well, I got married, let me study an MBA. And that helped, you know, intellectual curiosity was helpful, still felt empty. Then I thought, well, let me have a baby. So I had a baby. And to my horror and dismay, I still felt empty. And I thought, well, now I'm really stuck. And I didn't enjoy my work anymore. And I didn't have time for my child. And I was like, now let me go back. So I went into academia. I got back to UCT, employed as a lecturer. And that was stimulating for a bit, but still not quite right. And then I met actually the founder of the Center for Coaching, Craig O'Flaherty. And he said to me, no, he wants to open a center at UCT. And he couldn't find an academic to sponsor it. But we were working together on a different course I was teaching on the MBA, company analysis. And he said, well, why don't you experience being coached first? And perhaps for me, that was the moment, because during receiving coaching, I learned more about myself in those 6 months, 12 months, than I had learned about myself all the years prior. And I thought I was very on top of myself. I thought I was very self-aware. But I discovered suddenly I was no longer empty. I had a purpose. I had an interest. And I thought, imagine if I could do this with somebody else, for somebody else. And then Craig shared his dream. He said, but I want to open a center at UCT, because in those days, nobody knew what coaching was at all. And so we collaborated. I helped him get in. He started the center. And I said, well, I want to learn how to teach this work. And of course, first I had to study the work. And I couldn't afford to go to New Ventures West in the USA to study it. So we landed up starting the courses in South Africa all the way in 2001. We did a 2-day course, if any of you did it, Coaching to Excellence. And then in 2004, we were allowed to open the first 6-month course. And by that time, you know, I'd been fiddling around in coaching and studying and reading, and I thought I was more self-aware. And I came on the 6-month course, which looked very different to what we now do. And I just cried every single day on the course, because I was just overwhelmed with all these insights. And of course, when I get an insight, I'm processed through my eyes. So I learned so much. I was like, whoa, this is incredible. While I was coaching other people, I learned even more about myself. And it was astonishing. You think you come on this course to learn about how to coach others. And next thing you know, you are finding out that you yourself have these patterns. I see some nods and smiles going on. Yeah, so you were not alone, trust me. But that's what got me hooked. Even more, I said to Craig, I've got to teach this work. Because here's the thing, when you teach or coach, you get so much as well, not only when you experience. And so the learning continued. And then I had to wait till PCC was offered the first time in 2006. Was the first PCC offered. I was in that group. And again, just one insight after the next. Perhaps as Navid said, you know, that vertical development where you go deep into your own patterns and you get offered a different way of being in the world. particularly strong on the PCC, but we start that journey on ACC or CFD on the 6-month course as well. And living in the world from a different place was probably the most meaningful thing, because instead of being a superwoman who ran around doing everything for everybody and just coping, that was my thing. I had to learn how to fundamentally shift into somebody who could stop and be present and engage and really listen. And I always say, if I could learn to coach, anybody can learn to coach, because there was nothing in my makeup or my initial psyche that was suited to being a coach. I was a very frenetic person. And I still can be frenetic, as Daniel would know. But I've learned how to shift and how to settle and how to hold and to be present for others. And that's the journey. I've got so many stories I can share when we start the dialogue, Daniel. But that's the journey when I see others go on even a fraction of I know what I've experienced. I know that it will make such a difference in their lives.
Thank you so much, Janine. And what's interesting, as you're all hearing and how we're experiencing what Navid and both Navid and Janine are sharing, is that as we come onto a program where we are orientating towards how we can support others in their journey, the first step on that journey is actually a lot about our own insights about how we engage with the world. And so thank you for sharing that about your journeys and how that has evolved over time, which has led to the possibilities that emerge as you are able to gain those insights. I mean, from my perspective, it was I also came to an amazing insight. I'd studied martial arts for many, many years. And it was only when I came at the ripe old age of 40 on my first coaching program that I got the insight to say, I can take what I had learned for many, many, many years and getting my black belts, first, second, Dan, take that out of the dojo and into the workplace. And that was such a massive insight for me and opened up an enormous world of possibility of the way in which I engaged with others. So that's the insight about us as leaders ourselves. But I suppose my question to both of you is, how is, and in your experience, how has integral coaching developed leadership capacities that you have experienced yourselves in the way you've engaged with those around you since you started your coaching journey? I don't know who would like to kick it off.
Well, I can go with my corporate experience, yes, which is when I was working at my last company called Vodafone. They're a telecommunication company. They're called Vodacom in South Africa. It's the same firm. And I partnered with our group CFO at the time, who was an incredible leader. I mean, she was originally from Italy, had lived in the UK for a long time. She's today the group CEO of the same company. So she was promoted again from group CEO to group CEO, one of the only 3 women on the FTSE 100 index. And I remember one day we had a late night kind of session. It was a tough day. And she said, in our one-on-one, Navid, you're the only one in my leadership team that disagrees with me. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is not a good conversation to have at like 9:30 in the evening. And then she said, but I want you to know that I appreciate that. And I want to ask you to continue doing that, because you're the only one in my entire leadership team that actually publicly disagrees with me. And so, not suggesting if you become an integral coach, you're going to disagree with everyone. But the fact that I found a way into this relationship and into this conversation to be respectful and yet say what I felt was the truth that needed to be told right there, right then, was not only acknowledged, but also appreciated. So this is just, and again, of course, I would never claim that I was her informal coach or anything of that nature. But the fact that I was able to have those conversations with someone who was clearly a lot more senior than I was knowing that the two predecessors to me had only lasted about 10 to 12 months each. And so, it's a bit of a jump seat in the company to then have the chutzpah to say, you know what, I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're trying to do, I fundamentally disagree with that, and allow me to say why I do that. And these are the 3 reasons why I think this is the absolute wrong approach, and this is why I think we should shape-shift it into something that actually works. That's what the integral coaching gave me, the ability to be able to connect and to be truth to what needs to be said, and yet say it in a way that doesn't ruffle feathers or rock the boat too much, or creates tension unnecessarily. So, which is what I used to do prior to that, right? I mean, I was born in Iran. I grew up in Germany. In Germany, there's not much reading in between the line required, and so that's what I grew up with, and that's how I became as a person and as a leader as well. So that will be kind of my one example how I can relate to what you asked, Daniel.
Super. Thanks so much, Navid. Janine, from your side.
So I'd like to share a story actually of we get different types of people coming on our programs. And one kind of person that sometimes arrives is the sort of person who's been sent. They've been sent to us because the company doesn't know what to do with this person, this leader. They're too senior to discipline. They don't actually know what to do with them. So occasionally, not so often, but occasionally, and we never know, of course, this we discover afterwards. But this leader arrived and he was completely jitter. I mean, he would literally sit there and jitter, and then he'd put on joking backgrounds and he'd laugh and he'd, you could see he was on his phone half the time. And he arrived, he could not sit still. He could not sit still. And he kept talking about how wonderful he was and how wonderful a leader he was. And when he paired up with people to engage in practice sessions, he succeeded in upsetting just about everybody he spoke to. And he couldn't hear them. He wasn't listening. He would just talk and give them advice. And it was so fascinating how, what do you do with somebody like that who's showing up that way? The only thing we can do is to show up in a coaching way in response to that. And what was amazing is over the course of the 6 months, because he was on the CFD program, the 6-month one, we watched how from one module to by the end of module 1, he was like, I might have been missing something in my very successful career, and how many cars he has, and everyone knew. He said, but actually, I think I've missed a trick or two. I'm not sure I listen to people. I went, oh, oh, really? Anyway, and then he carried on, and there's pods, and he had to practice. Module 2, he's like, he arrived jittery already by halfway through day 1, he started to settle. He's like, and he started to be able to calm down and just be there. And by the end of the 3rd session, the 3rd module, he was actually able to hear somebody. And he was able to say, I realize what a terrible leader I am, as compared to the beginning when all he could say was how wonderful he was. But it was bravado. He said, I came and I know that's what I was saying, because, by the way, incredibly smart person. But it was bravado. And he felt safe enough to share with us as the community how he was feeling. And he had to keep going. He didn't manage to finish the course in the same time as everybody. He had to do extra work, which he gladly did. And he actually called me and he said, Janine, my life has changed. I fundamentally realized that the reason for my terrible relationships, personal relationships, has been that I never listened to anybody. And he said, I really want to continue this journey. I know that I have a long way to go, but the humbleness and the open, and he said, and I actually talked to my team over the last few months, and they are so inspired and motivated, our performance has increased, where before I was going to fire most of them. So it looks like it might be a small matter, but that alone, I've seen such a fundamental shift from that kind of person who arrives unable to hear others, convinced of their own success, or they know there's something, but they don't know what they don't know. And so part of the journey of receiving integral coaching as a coachee or being on a program where you learn the skill is you learn to see yourself, but in a non-judgmental way, with people who are also not judging you. And that allows for, I think, an accelerated expansion. And I think that's why people say our work is transformational, because we don't judge. And so people can really let go and find themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Janine. And I think that complements what you were saying, Navid, about the way in which you engage, but also the way in which we're able to listen, and how that fundamentally shifts through our capacity to embody that in a new way. Because we can think about this all day long, but it doesn't make us any better at being able to express ourselves or be able to hear what others are saying. I suffered from the same thing as a leader. I was very much 20 miles ahead of everyone else, and I couldn't understand why until I did the 6-month program, CFD, ACC in the day. And I realized I wasn't listening to my team. I didn't stop long enough for them to actually be able to share what was really going on. And when I started to listen, exactly as you say, Janine, that connection started to form. And it was like, wow, a power was unleashed in the team, which I'd never experienced before. So Navid, what's coming up for you from that perspective as well, from in your experience, from the capacity to be able to...
I mean, what I can say is, I mean, coming back to the notion of vertical development versus horizontal development, I really felt that, you know, I have high ambitions. Those of you who know Enneagram, I'm a type 3 with a 4 wing. So there are some traits just in my DNA that I will never be able to kind of deny. All of that being said, I really felt when I did ACC or CFD today, PCC, and later on, it really became apparent when I did the Towards Mastery course, I was essentially, although I was kind of one of the oldest in the group, I was essentially the least developed. That's how I looked at it. Now, that was a great realization, because I really saw, oh my goodness. So I remember that one exercise, Janine, you may or may not remember this, when we were asked, and I may actually have sat next to Tatiana, I don't know, but one of the silly exercises we did was to write down any and all emotions that you know of. And of course, I was done after 3 words, right? Happy, sad, disappointed. And then I look left and right and I see, like, the colleague on the right has got half a page scribbled already. The other one has already finished the page and is now writing the page too. And I'm thinking, like, it never occurred to me to be something that I paid even attention to, right? And again, it's those little things that really help you to realize how much work, internal work, we have to do. And it really is like an ocean of possibilities that opens up. That's how I felt. And I remember when I showed up for the Towards Mastery course, the next junior person next to me had been a PCC for 10 years. And here I was, my PCC certificate was, like, you know, still coming out of the printer. And I was sat in the room with 11 other incredible individuals and Sarita, and you know, learning how to become a more masterful coach. So I really felt I had a lot to learn in a good way, and I never stopped learning since then. I never felt like, oh, okay, I've done tick, 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 as I would have previously, right? Oh, I was recognized as this and that. Great, I can drop the ball, I can drop the pen, I'm done. It really became a lifelong journey. And the other thing I wanted to say, which is not really related to CFD, but as part of our PCC practice, I believe it was module 1 or module 2, we were encouraged to try out meditation, right? And I thought, oh my goodness, this is like going to be an utter waste of my time, right? I mean, yeah, I know it's only 15 minutes, but you know how many emails I can fire out of my inbox in those 15 minutes? Or I could actually, you know, go for a run, or I could sleep 15 minutes long. I could do so many other things. And of course, 10 years in, I never stopped doing my homework, because I saw after 30 days of doing the meditative practice that I started, again, you could have presented me with all the world facts as to why it makes sense. I may have looked at it, but I would never be as convinced as I am today, and recommending it to my own coachees to consider taking that spiritual kind of part of what we often cut off or are unaware of. These are just some examples of how I really felt when I started the journey. And it's really, for me, it's like I just walked through a gate that took me from whatever world I was in into a whole new world, and I have nowhere near explored this new world.
Thank you very much, Navid. And I think you've encapsulated it so well. It's that vast journey that is starting to that opened up as you walked through the door, little realizing that this wasn't another tick box exercise, but it was actually something completely different. Yeah, it's it resonates so completely what you're saying. Right, we're going to hand over to some questions. I see we have a hand raised. Dr. Aditya.
Hi, Professor. I'm Dr. Aditya speaking. I have few questions. Like, I am into the health sector, and almost we deal with the all sectors of the people. And few days are very happy and few days are very low. So my question to you is, how can I get over this negative feelings or negative vibes which we get and encounter during the patient interaction or in emergency duties? Because sometimes it pulls us back. I don't want nothing should happen to my patient, because I should be in a cheerful mode. You know, we have 72 hours duty downline in India, where we are exhausted very much. And when we meet like negative vibe people, suddenly we are pulled down. How can I come out of it? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aditya. Who would like to pick that up? Janine?
I'm happy to give it a go, and then Navid, you can. So, Dr. Aditya, thank you for raising that. And I think that if there was a quick and easy answer, I would be a millionaire right now. So with that caveat, if I can say, what I've seen over the many years of working with people, and we have medical professionals who've come, studied with us. There's another doctor here on the call, and all the wisdom that they have shared with me. Probably, ironically, in fact, Navid just spoke about the single most powerful practice that has supported professionals who work, in the kind of incredible pressure you have, is to learn, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, but every single day, to ground and meditate of one of the practices. But that's not enough. So it's like, what is it that your pathway needs? What would you need as an individual in terms of your narrative to develop, to support you, to have this capacity to channel the energy of others? Because when we are in the helping professions, even as coaches who hold the energy of their coachees land up being very full very quickly, and they collapse, just like you must do as a professional yourself. And yet, if we cut ourselves off from our patients or our coachees, we can't connect with them and we can't really heal. And so how to develop the capacity to be like a pipe through which empathy or compassion, not empathy, let's say, compassion can flow. And sometimes there'll be bumps in the pipe and so on. But that journey to develop enlarge your pipeline so that you can allow the goods and the bad and the emotions and the positive to flow through you, that would be a journey. That would be an incredible individual path for you to perhaps explore. And if I can say, you know, we can talk all day long, but what we also know is that, to Navid's point, until somebody experiences it for themselves, they cannot experience the shift. But what I will say is a story that broke my heart, really. I was terribly excited when it was one of the first doctors who came to study with us in Johannesburg, actually, and he was the head of palliative pediatric care for the country. And he worked at teaching hospitals, and he headed this up in some big medical system. And he came because he said he wanted to learn how to connect more. But he broke down on the second day of our first module, and he couldn't stop crying. And he said, he actually wrote to me afterwards, and he said, I cannot do this course because I have to deal with such trauma and such suffering of my patients, and I can't, I'm too overwhelmed. I can't open my heart. I cannot open my heart to my patients and their families, because if I do, this is what happened. I just can't stop crying. And he wasn't ready, and I invited him, come on a private journey, we'll support. And he said, I just can't. He wasn't. So going on the journey of exploring that would be a long one, but it's definitely worthwhile, an invitation. Hope that answers a bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Navid, do you have anything to?
Yes, I can build on what Janine already said, and some of those things may, you know, sound familiar to you or strange. So the first thing is, I used to work for a CHRO, one of my bosses, who, you know, was Dutch, and he used to tell all of us, life is tough. You might as well get used to it, right? So in our coaching kind of, you know, terminology, we call it structure of interpretation. How do I look to the world, and how do I perceive those things to be? If I wanted to use an instrument, this is, you know, if you're familiar with the Hogan assessment, it's the very first of the 28 scales on the Hogan assessment, which is called adjustment. And so if your score is high, mine is high, that means that, you know, you have to look at it like a dynamite, and how much is there to burn down until the thing explodes, until you start to demonstrate your dark side traits. And so there are just people who have a higher capacity to deal with anything and everything before they feel that they need help, or they need support, or they you know, show some of the traits that are not so nice. And for others, it takes, you know, just the wrong, you know, comment or a wrong, you know, move, and they explode. And so the first thing is to acknowledge where you sit on that spectrum, and to acknowledge that to yourself. Now, we are unlikely as human beings to fundamentally shift our way of being unless there is a fundamental event happening in our lives, such as, you know, divorce, you know, baby being born, or someone really close to us dies, or we grow much older. And so unless that is the case, our psychology and you know, the way we are is unlikely to materially shift. So what we then can do is to work with what we know of. So if I know, and at the time I knew, that I am too much in my head, that I am too much of a thinker, that I want to solve the world's problems through my head. And arguably I was, you know, on average successful with it. Now, I then learned this methodology. I learned to take care of myself. I learned the importance of sleep. I started experimenting, right? What happens if I cut down my sleep by an hour, or I add an additional 30 minutes to my night? And so by the end of this journey, I knew what would really set me up for success, as in what would really help me to even, you know, knowing that this is my kind of, you know, I have a high degree of resilience, generally speaking. But I started to work on what are my triggers, what gets me to be, you know, showing my dark side traits. And so there are many different ways you can work with this. So this is just one example, one acknowledgement. The second one I want to use is I do sometimes, you know, I work with very, very senior established executives, and sometimes they are in the same frame of mind when they come to the boardroom, right? They just had a horrible debate with the chairman and their job is on the line, or they just had, as it happened recently, it was my unlucky day as a coach, they just had the results announcement, the quarterly results announcement, and on the back end of that results announcement, the share price of that firm dropped by 8%. So they wiped billions out of their market cap. And of course, it's like a bad, situation to be in for anyone, including the CEO who was my client. But what I would do in that moment is not to say, okay, John, we're here to debrief your Hogan assessment. Let's get on with it now, right? Which is what I would have done previously. Like, it's like the Germanic part of my brain says, we got 60 minutes. This is the agenda item. We might as well just get on with it, right? Oh, bad news. I'm so sorry. But now on to, the topic. You have to meet your clients where they're at. And if I feel that my client is distressed, really unable to comprehend what we are about to do, I would really forget about that whole thing and to work with them right there, right then, to say, okay, I hear you. I understand that this is not a great moment. How about we do something that grounds you, and you tell me on the back end of that if you want to carry on with our session today, or if you feel we should reschedule for another date. Now, all I'm doing is giving him the permission to be in the driver's seat, to decide whether he wants to ground himself, take a sip of water, and decide if he's up for it, or if he really feels probably it's not going to be his most productive day, no matter whether it's me or Janine or whoever's his coach. We may as well reschedule the session. So these are just two things I want to share. So one is knowing yourself, knowing your makeup, knowing your personality, and how you respond to those stressful moments and trigger points, and work with those. And the second thing is, sometimes we have to kind of, forget about whatever we had planned in the moment on that day, and do what serves us the most and what works for the rest. There is a reason on the plane when they do the safety announcement, they say, put on your safety mask first, right? And that means that even if you have your own children with you on the plane, you need to put on your safety, a procedure at the first priority, and then you need to, work with the others and help them. And the same principle applies to your clients. If the client is unable to continue, if you are unable to continue, if the client said something that triggered something in you where you feel not really capable of holding the space and carrying on the conversation, you might as well call it a day and to say, you know what, I just had this experience, something came up for me, and I want to respectfully ask if you could meet again. So these are just 2 or 3 angles to the same situation. It won't help your situation in a direct way, but these are just the various data points I can point out to that have helped me in the past how to deal with those distressful moments, whether it's on the client side or on my end.
Thank you very much, Navid. And I think that what the question that has been raised by Dr. Aditya is something, as you pointed out, Navid, that is faced by many of those, whether they be in the health professional that you exposed or the corporate world. There is a growing level of pressure of and the burnout kind of space that is becoming more and more acknowledged as well. Starts by, as you pointed out, saying, can I build that self-knowledge of what's going on? And that's not enough. What are the practices that I'm implementing in order to build my capacity over time to be able to orientate and to build the capacity to be able to deal with whatever is coming at me? And as coaches, well, first we need to learn that, and then we need to support others in being able to do that and cultivate that for themselves. Well, yeah, we're coming close to the end of our webinar. So it's been fascinating having this conversation and the direction that we've been in. But what I want to do is hand over to Janine, because of course we have our next CFD program starting in January. So I'm going to pop up a slide for you to comment, Janine, and run through for the participants what we have coming up. in 2025. Because of course, Janine is the course leader for Coaching for Development. And so it's obviously a much better option to hear directly from Janine herself rather than from me. So I'm handing you the opportunity to share with participants what is our Coaching for Development course all about that we've been alluding to.
Okay. So while I do that, Navid, I see you have a question in the chat. You're welcome to answer that one.
Yes. Well, just very quickly, she was CFO when I was working with her. She only was later promoted when I left the firm to become CEO, just to get the facts correct. And I'm not sure she actually wanted to encourage an awful lot of disagreement in her team. She just confided in me that I happened to be the only one, and she encouraged me to continue. Now, whether she had those same conversations with the rest of the leadership team, I don't know, but I certainly did my end to, in my one-on-ones with the other members, to say, hey, I just see that there's always strong agreement, whatever she says. And so I'm wondering if everyone is actually in strong agreement with everything that she's saying. And if there isn't, what is getting in the way of raising what you feel needs to be said? So that's kind of just a quick one on that.
Okay, thank you. Right, so the 6-month course, what I can say is, doesn't matter whether you arrive as accomplished as Navid, for example, who knew everything under the sun, and yet he arrived with an openness to learn. And so we have people who arrive who are already trained psychologists, in fact. We sometimes have psychologists, we've had a psychiatrist, we've had people who are already coaches, but they need the qualification. So when you come, it's 8 contact days. So there's 3 virtual sessions, 3 days, 3 days, and 2 days. And you can see here that the start, over the course of the year, there are 3 starting points to the year. You either start in January and you go for 6 months, or in March you can start, or in July you can start. Those 3 blocks are very important. You're required to be there for the full 8 days. But as I say, the first block is 3 days. And in there, we kick you off, and then you move into a sort of either once or sometimes twice a month, you meet with your virtual learning pod, a small group of 5 or 6 people with your professional mentor coach. So you have a high faculty-student ratio. You have much more faculty interaction than those who had it in person. That's the one advantage of face-to-face, of virtual. And we mix our international group. So you will be in the same class as people from all over the world. Majority tends to be from South Africa, but it's really, really useful to be able to meet with people internationally. Often people who are expats and they don't have a network, they come on the course and they discover that actually they meet people and make real relationships, very importantly. The price, as you see there, you can pay once off or on a monthly basis. And I think allow 2 to 3 hours a week, because you need to go out and coach. You can't learn coaching by studying it. You can do a doctorate in coaching. It's not going to make you a better coach. So being there and studying it is fantastic. But probably the most important thing is your individual growth and development as a person. So you will actually land up growing and seeing things about yourself whilst you practice the skill of others. So, I mentioned that emptiness, and Navid talked about lifelong learning. I promise you, I'm 23 years later, and I'm still learning every day. So we are all in this in a very humble way, although your faculty, they're usually about anything, depending on the class, between 6 and 10 or even more faculty members who work with you in the small breakouts. Each of them is on this lifelong journey path. So you will never feel judged. But it's a tough course. I mean, you got to work. It doesn't just happen. And at the end of it now, there is an assessment. So that too is part of it.
Super. Thank you so much, Janine. I know we're out of time. So thank you so much for everyone who has joined. One last thing. For international applicants, we do have a special offer, which we will extend until the 28th. You will be able to attend one of our leadership conversations workshops entirely free of charge if you sign up before the 28th. And that is all that I have to share, other than to say a very, very, very big thank you to Janine and to Navid for coming to share your insights, your stories, your journeys. I always learn something new, and the insights that you shared, Navid, and helping us to kind of reconnect vertical, horizontal, bringing in assessments as well, and how all of that relates to how we are with ourselves and how we are able to impact those that we work with, whether it be through coaching as you do, or through the way we are leaders or fathers or mothers, etc. The impact that we can have by being attentive to that space that you spoke about, creating that space which gives us a choice. Sounds so simple, and yet requires a lifelong journey of work to be able to become more and more accomplished in that arena. And Janine, deep respect. Thank you so much for coming and for joining us on this evening. And for everyone who has joined us from around the world, we will share the recording with you as well, and the slides that we presented. But thank you for all coming, and we really enjoyed having this exchange together.
Thank you. Bye.
Everyone.
Bye. Bye.
I didn't say hello
Thank you.